So another big company at my size, they probably wouldn't know who the CEO is, right? They wouldn't know who's a decision maker. But I make myself very, very accessible. Anybody can walk in my door. So it's a tough battle. It's always a going back and forth. It's never a perfect solution for this. But these are some of the things that we did.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik, and with me, as always, is John Cohen. How you doing?
We're good. Hanging in there, doing some housekeeping. No complaints.
Yeah, no, today's been a good day. Things are starting to tick back open. Things are starting to tick back up. A lot of the states we're in, though, are having an uptick in cases. So we'll see what happens the next couple of weeks, whether there's a re-lockdown or not. I know Cuomo just threatened to kind of lock things back down in New York if people don't get their stuff together. So it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure.
And he called them stupid millennials and rich people, which was hysterical.
Is that what Cuomo really said?
Yes.
Hey, I mean, he's not wrong. It's mostly all my friends that are out doing it. I mean, felt like Friday and Saturday this past weekend, all I was seeing was photos and videos of people out at the bar outside by the beach, but way too close than what they're supposed to be. So I get it. I'm sure he gets way more than me. But awesome. We got a really great guest on today. I'm super excited. He is in the multifamily space like us, but he's done significantly more business, has built up a tremendous business for himself, his investors and employees. So I'm super excited to hear his story, how he's done it, pick up some tips, tricks, experiences, and, how-tos from him. So with that being said, I'm just going to invite him in. So Swapnil, thanks for joining us, bud.
Hey, thanks for having us. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to kick us off? Just a couple minutes, tell everybody who you are, your background, your journey, and kind of what you do.
No, thank you. So I'm a immigrant from India. I came to this country when I was 15 years old in late 90s. Typical immigrant story, worked hard, paid my way through college, did my finance degree, investment banking, private equity in Hong Kong for 6 years. Started my company, Nitya Capital, about 7 years ago in 2013, with the sole focus on buying workforce housing assets, which is where I grew up, by the way. I grew up in a lot of these rundown properties when I came to America, and I knew what was lacking, but it's easier said than done, So, here I was sitting in a high rise in Hong Kong, and here I was sitting in a D- asset, trying to collect rent with a bulletproof jacket on, and it worked out. So, we've been very lucky and fortunate, and we own and manage about 18,000 units today, and we've diversified into some other asset classes such as commercial, office, and mixed-use retail, single family houses, and outside of real estate as well. But very excited, $2.5 billion under management now, about 800 employees, including the corporate and on-site staff. But very fortunate, very lucky, and very happy to be here.
Love it. Beautiful. I think that's amazing. And I want to dive in a little bit more into the earlier years. I know just from hearing some of you speak on some other things, you were in Hong Kong for a number of years working for a company. I think it was in private equity, but I could be wrong.
Yes.
What made you come back? And then how did you transition into the real estate space?
Yeah, so I was in real estate in Hong Kong. So okay. I was working in a private equity real estate firm, and we were investing in assets, companies across Asia Pacific in real estate assets. And I've always wanted to be my own entrepreneur. I always want to have my own business, which like 99.9% people want to have their own business. The reason I wanted to come back first, because we were getting our first my first kid was on the way, and my parents were back in America. So I wanted to come back always. And when I came back, I said, look, I can get another job and keep doing what I'm doing, but I think it's a great time to transition. I was early 30s back then. And one thing what I realized is that when I was working for a private equity institution, and any other institution per se, we are a financial institution. So we are good at raising money and deploying that capital into operators. The challenge was always to find the right operator, right? To find a guy or a company or a group that is financially sophisticated, knows IRRs, returns, value add, CapEx, but then also has a great idea about, how to run a property, right? How to be hands-on. How do you fix a plumbing leak, right? How do you fix a HVAC? How do you fix a boiler? And really, there was none around. So I said, well, why don't I become one? And again, it's easier said than done. So my experience is all in the white collar space, analyzing, making PowerPoint presentations, finding deals. But to learn the operations, I sat at the properties myself, figured out how to do it. And I'm still figuring it out. There's no easy way out. It's one of the most difficult, very operationally intensive business to be in. And which is what a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people who buy these properties, they think it's very easy, to collect rents, buy properties. I think raising capital is the hardest part, which is true in a way. But for me now, operations is probably the hardest part of your job. How do you execute the business plan that you laid out for the investors?
I love that. I think that's super interesting. So when you came back and you saw an opportunity for, hey, there's tons of money out there looking for great operators, did you consciously say, hey, I'm going to take X amount of time and I'm going to either shadow a property manager or I'm going to manage a property myself, or was it out of necessity?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of out of necessity. So plus it was my value add, right? So when I go and pitch the business plan on a property, first of all, I didn't know much, right? I mean, this is like a D- asset in a very rundown area of Houston, but you're buying it for $15,000 a unit. You're really thinking like, how can I really go wrong? But you really can, because when I first saw the property after takeover, I mean, there was 20 air conditioners missing and there's like no appliances in any of the units. Half the people never paid rent. So you could make a mistake. So I said, look, if I'm going to pitch a business plan to raise capital with my investors, I got to do it myself. And I got to say, that's my value add. My value add is not to just identify an acquisition opportunity. My value add is I'm going to run it and make it better. That's going to add value to your capital. So that was really my pitch when I started raising capital.
Gotcha. So I think that's really interesting. Did you purposely go for a D- because you thought that's where the value was, or it was just an early mistake? You didn't really know what you were getting yourself into and you were just kind of weighing over your head day one and figured it out?
Yeah, I think at that time, Class A was just too expensive. I'm like, I can't raise this much money. So I got to buy the cheapest thing that's available. So it just kind of by luck or by order. And I had a strategy out of the thesis too, because my whole thesis was centered around this Hispanic multifamily workforce housing, which basically I picked Texas. But the whole thesis was there's so much migration, so much population is moving to Texas, not only from international, but domestically. And you have a population increase, they're going to have a need for place to live. And why don't we provide a nice, clean, safe place to live at like $500 or $600 a month? The demand will never be an issue, right? So how do you execute the business plan? How do you execute the operation, the expenses? And that's the thesis which this kind of apartment complexes fitted my strategy.
I think that's really interesting. I know, John, you went through something a little similar with the Philadelphia stuff. Was that something you also consciously thought of, or no?
Yeah. So early on when I was buying very, very rough properties in Philadelphia, all tax delinquent stuff. I was knocking on doors like this, like sideways, because you just never know what's going to happen. And the first property I bought, I knocked on the door, a tenant came over to me with a check, with an envelope of cash, and she said, "Here you go." And I said, "Oh, what are you giving me the cash for?" And she basically said, the landlord hasn't come pick up the money, so I just assume you're picking up the money. But the landlord was basically collecting money and not paying the taxes, so the property got taken away. And she basically told me I said, "Listen, I don't want the money. I'm going to help you. Let's work through the situation." And she basically said, she got outpriced out of Manhattan, outpriced out of Brooklyn, and she moved to Philadelphia and was commuting back and forth to New York City. That was the first property I bought. And when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Like, people are willing to do an hour and a half commute because the rent was $450. And it was just, when I saw that opportunity, I said, this is, how can you go wrong? Where can you afford to live for $450 in a nice, clean, safe place? And that was the piece where, and then it just fell in place when I became a broker and I was selling deals and starting to buy multifamily. So I completely understand that, where you can find that perfect demographic, so much migration not only domestically but internationally, it is very difficult and very expensive to rent something. So if you can take a D, C, and you could turn that property into a clean, safe place and affordable, the demand's always going to be there no matter what's going on. It's just the operation side, which I think you've done and you spoke about, that's where you said, okay, I'm going to do it because everyone else sucks at it. And that's where I think, internally, I have that conversation daily of what are we doing differently than everybody else? And so I agree with what you said 100%, because that component of housing and affordability, it's extremely difficult to find. So if you can do it and do it good, it's going to be a no-brainer.
The only thing I would say add to that is doing it good is always like the goal or the wish. It's just a constant journey, because it's just such a difficult business. It's just so many stakeholders in one property. I mean, you have tenants, employees, residents, and investors and vendors. And it's just the nature of the business that the staff you have is, you always have that gray collar or the blue collar staff. You don't have a college graduate that wanted to be a property manager. And that's the biggest issue in our industry, as you know, because there's no white collar student or college kids coming out say, I want to be a leasing agent. Right. And all of a sudden, I mean, a property manager, I have a property that's, 1,000 units in Houston. That's like $100 million property. I mean, the manager is really the CEO of a $100 million business, if you think about it. And that person might not even have graduated high school.
And I think that's something, and you could probably speak to it better than we can, but I know our managers complain all the time, staffing, right? You have the big boys coming in and taking good leasing agents and giving them a little bit more, maybe able to provide them more. But it's sort of, that space historically has been a very difficult job to hire for and then retain them, because the really good ones, as you said, they're CEO of a $100 million business. That's not just, you can't just pick that person up off the street. Now you can help them navigate that, but that's the challenge that I think most people don't ever even think about it. And the way that you broke it down is important. You put a property manager or a leasing agent, a $30 million asset, $20 million asset, $200 million asset, would you take a random guy off the street and make him run your company? Because every one of these deals you buy is a company. And I don't think anyone has ever painted that picture. And I think hearing it actually resonates well with me. And I think our listeners will love it, because, that's that role that you're trying to fill. And it's not the easiest thing to fill. And if you fill it, keeping it is very difficult. Yeah.
And not only the property management, but think about the maintenance staff, right? The skilled labor. I mean, my head property maintenance guy, or the ticket runner, or, the guy who can fix I have a chiller system. That's like a whole engineering unit. I mean, people go to get degrees to figure that out. Right. And now you're trying to hire a skilled labor person I mean, Texas is still pretty good, because you do have a lot of, pretty relaxed labor laws and whatnot, more business friendly, but it is hard. I mean, where do you find them? And then a lot of them will have immigration issues, right? But you need the job done, because if your work order is not serviced in the first 24, 48 hours, that's the number one reason why people move out, right? So, and then it's 100 degrees today in Houston, and there's boiler issues, there's chiller issues, there are HVAC issues all the time. There's roof leaks, there's plumbing leaks. Now, you can't call third parties all the time, right? Because then you're not making any cash flow. So hiring the property manager, assistant, leasing is difficult. I said skilled labor, the maintenance staff is even more difficult for us.
Yep.
Right? Where do you find them? I mean,
the demand for them has been through the roof. So, a guy can take a job at the property next door and get an extra $2 an hour. That's a lot of money when you break down their salary. So the really good skilled labor force, difficult. People ask me all the time, I don't know what I want to be. Be a plumber, be an electrician. You're going to create your own, you can make millions of dollars very easily, but nobody likes those jobs, right?
No. They want a desk job. They want to be an accounting job and a desk, white collar job. Say, why don't you become a car mechanic? Because you take your car in the car mechanic shop, they can tell you whatever you want, and you're going to have to do it. You have no idea what's wrong with the car, right? Exactly. Same thing with a plumbing leak. There's a leak under the ground. Now, what are the options? You have to dig, first of all, 10, 15 feet under. And then it's almost like you're a doctor where you're trying to figure out where's the leak. I mean, the guy might think the leak is in one place, but it might be 10 feet further down. So you got to keep digging it and keep fixing it. And it's going to cost a lot of money. The one thing that I did fortunately did very well is because I was at the property level myself, and I was very lucky that I had a great loyal following. I took care of my people. So for the first 10, 15, 20 properties, I knew everybody by their first name. So I still have those people, because it was very hard to hire when you're starting out. When you have 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, nobody knows who you are, right? They'll go to Greystar or they'll go to some bigger company, right? Now we are fortunate that Karya has a brand name. So we have a HR department, we have full-time recruiters. We didn't have all of that, when we were starting the business. And that's, to any of your listeners who's starting or is in the process of starting, don't underestimate that part. Raising capital, finding deals is probably the easiest part of their jobs compared to the operations when it comes later.
So then because I think it's really interesting how much you've talked about finding good quality people to work with and for you. How have you been successful finding the right people early on and even today to kind of fill both, those skilled positions as well as, your kind of corporate positions?
Yeah, I think I had a good fortune, and I was also, I like to work with the people I've known for a long time. So I surrounded myself with the people I've known for 10, 15, 20 years. And I had the good fortune that they believed in my vision. They took that leap of faith. They took huge amount of pay cuts. So all my executive teams are people I've known for 10 plus years. My ex-bosses from Hong Kong, Asia. My partner is my high school buddy who I went to college with, at our first job together. So it's about, figuring out your strength. What is my strength? My strength is being aggressive, taking that risky call where others might overanalyze and not go for it. Like, for example, when we started buying in 2013, 14, 15, I figured out pretty quickly that this is a great arbitrage opportunity, which will not last too long, because you're buying these properties for 25, 30, 40, 50 a door. I said, land itself is probably worth more than what you're buying the structures for. So I said, we got to get very aggressive, which we did. And at that time, everybody will hate on you, say, oh, this guy's overpaying. I said, great, you guys can believe whatever. And now they're paying 150 a door for the same things, right? So you got to have passion, you got to have the vision, and you got to have the same belief. Now, that's my strength, right? And then surrounding myself, building a team. Now, execution, which is, okay, I can't do everything myself. So I got to have a lawyer, I got to have an accounting team, I got to have financial analysts, do an asset management. So I kept hiring. So for me, it was always a long-term vision goal, still is, because I knew that I'm not going to get limited to 10, 20 properties. I'm going to have thousands of properties soon. So I kept putting the money back, keep hiring. And a lot of trial and error. Not every hire I made worked out good, right? I mean, I was more right than wrong, which is a great thing. And then on the property level, like I said, because I was so much at the property level, I had the chemistry or this thing with the staff there, the construction guys, where they stuck with me. They stuck with me, and I took care of them. And then the word spreads that this guy will take care of you, work hard.
Yeah, I think there's an understated value to loyalty, I guess, if you want to put a word on it, when you work with someone and you feel a certain way and they do right by you and do different things, that is hard to justify. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we've had is when we buy a property, because there's a weird disassociation between corporate employees and on-site employees, because as properties buy and sell, oftentimes the on-site will go from one company to another. It's a weird blend of, do you work for the property manager and the property management company, or do you work for the property? And some people feel strongly about one way and others feel about the other way. And some will just bounce back and forth and look for the best fit for them. Is there anything that you think you guys have done very well in maintaining those on-site staff employees to kind of feel like they're part of the company and not the property and are willing to stay longer?
Yeah, we have. And I realized this challenge very quickly, that there's a big dichotomy. You have the corporate level, the white collar, and the blue collar. And how do you connect those two? When I'm raising capital, buying deals, I put a very beautiful PowerPoint presentation and Excel model. Makes the IRRs 20% plus every time and the cash yield. Now, how do I translate that business plan into somebody that might not even have gone to college? Math skills might be very limited. Now I'm relying on that person to execute the business plan, which I showed my investors a success. So I realized that problem. So what we did is we started our own university. So we started Karya University. And we have a full term curriculum and coursework. We have classes every day from 5 to 7 p.m. where every staff needs to come, and they organize it, which properties will come which day, and they get credits. And they, after the certain credits, they are qualified for a promotion. After promotion, they're even qualified to be a teacher. So starting a university was very important because then they come to the corporate office, they're interacting with everybody. And then what I did is to manage my assets, I created a team of 3. So typically, as you might know, there's a regional supervisor at any property that oversees, 1,500, 2,000 units. So what I did is, instead of just having a regional supervisor, because a regional supervisor, let's face it, is pretty blue collar in nature too. They've been managers for a few years and they become a supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So what I said, I paired them up with an asset manager. So my asset manager is like a Harvard graduate or a Wharton graduate, PE experience, knows the numbers. So essentially, the asset manager acts like a quarterback who can direct the regional supervisor on the sound. Hey, pay attention to this 5 leases that are coming due, or this 30-day notices, or there's a lot of them. You need to do this. You need to push rates here. And then I pair them up with the accountant who's doing the monthly financials. So the accountant is seeing, okay, what's my payroll this month? What was my make-ready expense? What was my CapEx? And then if there's a utility bill that's extraordinarily higher than compared to other months, he can tell, or he or she can tell the asset manager, hey, pay attention to this light. Maybe there's underground leak why your water bill is so high. So there's a 3-pronged, approach to covering each asset. Mm-hmm. And now, because we have that's a great, leveler where you can connect the blue collar with the white collar and the corporate and the on-site. Another thing what we did is I stay very involved. So COVID is a prime example. The day one when it started, I sent an email to every employee of mine, said, no matter what happens, everybody will get paid full time, right? No matter what happens. That buys you a lot of loyalty, right? People are so blessed because a lot of these employees, they're paycheck to paycheck kind of employees, right? So they feel very grateful that when their employer is making the step, they're guaranteeing you a full-time pay. They feel very empowered. They feel very happy. Then I visit the properties myself on time to time. I wish I could do more. I just don't have the time to do that. And then I would say the last thing is just to connect with them. Like I went during this last week, I was in Dallas and Austin. Give thank you cards. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for being at the properties. And I think you have to be position yourself as being accessible. Mm-hmm. So another big company at my size, they probably wouldn't know who the CEO is, right? They wouldn't know who's the decision maker. But I make myself very, very accessible. Anybody can walk in my door. So it's a tough battle. It's always going back and forth. It's never a perfect solution for this. But these are some of the things that we did to overcome.
I love all that. I think that's incredible. I think the university idea is very intriguing. It's not something I've heard before because I could see that definitely being a hurdle. I know even when we talk with some of our managers and people that work on site, there's always a disconnect between ourselves and them. And you're seeing the same picture, but through 2 different types of lenses. And it gives a different picture for each. So trying to bridge that gap between the 2 is always an extra difficulty added in. I'm curious, do you you obviously have the education piece coming from the blue collar to the white collar. Do you do anything to help someone from a PE background, from a white collar background, help understand more of the physical attributes of the property? Because I know for myself, that's something I've always tried to learn and understand whenever we go visit is question the managers, question the maintenance guys, question the vendors, so I can have a better understanding of where you're talking about HVACs, boilers, chillers. I understand it a little bit, never as much as them. Do you do anything in that regard as well?
Absolutely. So like the asset managers, they all are white collar background. So they are required to visit all of their properties once every 2 weeks. So that gives them a flavor. And again, there's always a friction, a good friction, sometimes bad friction between the asset manager and the regional because, regional supervisor have been in this business for, they'll say on the resume, 20 years. Like they were started as a leasing agent, now they're supervisor. They think know everything about the business. Asset manager, 3-4 years out of college, worked at a PE shop or banking. The regional supervisor sometimes like, well, he or she doesn't know what really property management is. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you have to step in, the executive team have to step in a way. So it's a good friction sometimes. Sometimes it takes some effort to bridge that gap, but they're required to visit the properties. Another thing what I missed is to bridge that gap between the corporate and on-site is like 6 months ago, we hired a culture coach. So we had this wonderful lady that in teaching for 30 years, a school principal and professional psychologist. And all she does is go to property and just talk to people, appreciate them. Because a lot of times when me and you or asset managers, when we end up going to the properties, what do we ask? We ask about what's the occupancy, what's the collection, what's my delinquency, what do you need? But nobody asks and talk to them about their personal life. And all of us know the backgrounds of the on-site employees is not, somewhere, very, I said something to advertise. So sometimes just sit down and talk to them. How are your kids? How's your family doing? And that makes a big difference. I'll tell you a perfect example. One of the properties, a small property, 180 units. We were on the verge of firing this manager because our occupancy was like close to 80%. And I sent Miss Marita, that's our culture coach, said, go see the property, talk to the manager. Literally, she spent about a week with her, hour a day, and the property is 100% leased now, right? And it's unbelievable when you talk to people, you hear their concern, you appreciate what they do. It makes a huge difference in people's mind.
So what about, because I think that's a really interesting example, and if you're okay talking a little bit more specifically about it, what was something, or if what was something that came about from that conversation that so drastically made it change? Was it just something in their personal life? Was it, some sort of hiccup that she was able to bridge the gap?
Yeah, it's a mix of both, right? So she had issues in her personal life, and then she didn't feel appreciated, right? Mm-hmm. She thinks like she's fighting a losing battle, right? Like nobody appreciates the work, and it's not easy, man. It's not easy to be a property manager. You have so many like angry tenants. They have so many issues. They're constant yelling. So there's a lot of pressure. Sometimes we discount the fact that, their job is not as difficult, but just dealing with people is not an easy. I mean, I'd rather sit in my office and do work on my iPhone, and I get a lot accomplished. But when you have to talk to people, solve real life problems, when you tell somebody that, hey, we'll fix your AC in 48 hours, it's been 1 week, we haven't got the AC done. I mean, that's not a pretty situation to deal with. So just sitting down with her and telling her that, look, everybody appreciates the work she's doing. We understand the property is struggling, but don't worry about it. You're not going to lose your job. And that's it. Just a simple message.
Yeah. So I think that you're right. Because, the on-site team, they're dealing with shit that you can't even imagine. I mean, even on our weekly calls when we're talking, this person had this issue and that issue, and it rolls off their back because it's like day to day. And you sit there at the top seat and you're like, I can only imagine dealing with that stuff day by day. And each property is different. 100 unit property is different than a 400 unit property. And that person is the quarterback of that community. And I think sometimes, just getting into their life on, hey, what's going on? Forget what, that little piece sometimes just changes everything. That, wow, someone's willing to care. And it's not just getting beat to death by tenants on a day-to-day basis. I think little things like that can get so much out of employees that, most people don't even think about.
Absolutely.
So when you've been, obviously early on, you were very ingrained and, started scaling, were you able to transition early on to the investor side of private equity, institutional capital, or were you like a lot of people where you raise money from friends, family, high net worth individuals, acquaintances, and stuff like that?
Yeah, look, we started with 4 investors, and now we have over 800, all through word of mouth references. We've never hired a broker dealer or any third party to raise capital for us. And I would say that for a long time, we were doing high net worth, friends and family capital. We have a lot of institutional capital now, but I'll tell you, there's no better capital than high friends and family capital, because they give you that, that the freedom to execute your plan. That obviously, and I tell everybody, whoever invested in me from day one, it's like, don't look at the PowerPoint, don't look at the opportunity, look at me. If you trust me, if you can believe in me, then give me the capital, or then invest in your capital. And that's been my consistent message from day one. So don't look at the deal, trust, and if you can trust me, then you should invest. And I live up to that. And so we work with very high integrity. And look, we will try our best to perform what this piece of paper is telling you. But if it doesn't for any reason, it's not going to be because of lack of effort.
Mhm.
That's what you can make it clear to them. It's like it's because the markets wasn't favorable. There's just unexpected stuff that happened. And people take that seriously, right? When you tell them that we're going to work with high integrity and make this a successful event for you. So for longest time, we did high net worth capital. We still do a lot of high net worth capital. We are in the process of raising a pretty, $500 million fund now. This is our first fund. We've done deal by deal so far. So we're raising a fund out of Middle East. We have private equity institutions out of New York. But it's just a different, people sitting in a high-rise building in New York in a private equity institution, they can't relate to this business on the ground, right? In their mind, okay, you gave us a budget of X, why are you 2% off budget? Well, budget is just a guideline, right? You can't, it's a metric where you perform, doesn't mean that we'll always perform. Sometimes you perform better, right? Because it's just on-ground realities are so different. And I feel that working with high net worth, good people who are just loyal to you, and we've done well for them, it's just a lot more enjoyable experience for me personally, although we have all kinds of investors.
Gotcha. So I've got a bunch of places I want to go with this, but how were you able to spread so well word of mouth? Was it just a ton of networking? You're just out in front of a ton of people, every single day, week in, week out? Was it just, you had connections from your prior job already and you were able to leverage those? What were some of the ways, very early on that really helped you scale quickly?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yep, no worries.
A lot of hustle, man. A lot of hustle. And to be honest, it still seems surreal that, we were $2.5 billion AUM now. And we started with first property, it was $1.3 million in August 2013. So 7 years ago. But yeah, look, when we started, obviously I had just came back from Hong Kong. I spent 7 years there. So I didn't have a lot of contact in America because, I was for 7 years out of U.S. But my partner Vivek helped quite a bit. He was working for a hedge fund here. So he got a lot of introductions to his old colleagues from the hedge fund industry, and they're all ultra high net worth. So for them, investing a couple $100,000 each wasn't a big deal for them. And we leveraged off that, right? So and it was a great time, to be honest, because we bought deals, quickly implemented our value add, refinanced, returned their capital within 6 to 12 months. They were just like, wow, they're pretty amazed. Like, how can you do that, right? It really was just supposed to be for long term. So timing worked, a lot of hustle, a lot of call people, meeting people. But I'm always very clear about my philosophy that anytime I met any potential investor who wanted to invest and they say, look, I'll invest. At that time, deals were much smaller, say 50,000 or 100,000. And I always ask them that, how much savings do you have? And if they told me anything less than 250,000 or 250,000, I just wouldn't accept their capital because I don't want them to lose sleep over this 50 or 100,000 they're giving me. And when you tell somebody that you don't want it, they actually want it more, right? So bottom line is it's very fortunate. We did a lot of hustle. We were lucky. We bought at the right time. This is a combination of all those things.
I think that's important because most people don't realize just because they can invest and they want to invest means that they should invest. And we do the same thing now. Just understanding who your investors are and making sure that they can handle whatever happens. Because like you said, sometimes it goes 100% according to plan. It very rarely does. More often than not, you can get it done, but it's a little bit heavier. And you don't want people, losing sleep over it. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's better. You're better off saying no than taking it and dealing with the headaches that they can cause. There's enough headaches on the day-to-day operations. The last thing you want is on the investor relations side because that's completely unrelated. And unfortunately, you could fire a manager, you could bring in a new contractor. It's much more difficult to get a new investor or to get them their money back, not at a loss, if you can even return it. So people don't speak about that enough. And I think it's an approach that, people listening, take it to heart and understand that, because understanding who your investors are and what they're capable of is very important to making these deals run smoother. And you don't want to add problems if you don't have to.
Absolutely. And then, what I told my investors that time too is, look, I couldn't get non-recourse loans back then. It's like I had no credit, I had no net worth. So I signed personal guarantees, and I was lucky enough. One of my close friends was co-signing with me, a higher net worth than me. So I said, look, your risk is limited to the investment you're making. For me, I'm putting everything in line, right? So I'm personally guaranteeing all these loans. If anything bad happens, look, I'm on the hook for much more than you're investing in it. So getting that message across was also important.
That's important. I don't think people, it's a little bit easier to get non-recourse today, but the first deal I did was in 2014. It was 100% recourse. I had to have a friend of mine and my dad sign on the loan. And people saw that as, okay, well, that's a lot of risk. And if they're willing to take that risk, I'll take that risk. And I know you mentioned it earlier. People always think the good deals are going to get funded, and they do. But your first investors are typically people, the piece of paper, you always want to act as if you're a $100 billion company, but they're not making the investment in the 20% IRR. They're making the investment in you rolling up your sleeves and getting it done. And people don't talk about that recourse component of it. So listen, you're putting $100,000 in, I got $1 million loan, right? And I think people have to today it's a little bit different, but people should play off of, if you want to go to a random guy you met on the street, he doesn't care who you are per se. He's looking at the numbers on paper. I advise, going the other way and let people know who you are and that this is what you stand for and this is what you've worked so hard to achieve. Getting that person to invest is going to be easier and probably better than, going on a crowdfunding website and just getting 27 people to give you money, because that most likely is going to be more pain in the ass. So I think you nailed it the way you broke it down. And I think people should take that to heart and hear it out because it's important.
Absolutely.
So as you've worked with both the high net worth and the institutional side, have you changed your business plan at all with the institutional side? Or has it just been, hey, this is what we do. If you're interested, we would love to work with you. If not, we don't think you're right.
The latter. I haven't changed my business plan. We are very opportunistic, man. For me, it's just, we were multifamily, and now we have, about 1 million square foot of office space. I have another 1 million square office space under contract. I mean, people are shitting all over Houston office, but, we've done our due diligence. You're buying it at 9.8 going in cap rate on 80% occupancy and 30% under, the rents are under market. We just feel really good. So I don't want to change a business plan because of somebody else. And I have the luxury to do so now. Given where I am today. So for me, it's just, okay, this is where I see opportunity and this is what I'm going to do. If you would like to invest, great. If not, then I'll find investors somewhere.
I love that.
Yeah. So when you started going into the institutional realm, would you get a lot of pushback on things you wanted to do in the way you were doing business? Or did you have enough of a track record already that people were like, hey, this guy's onto something, let's take him very seriously?
Yeah, institutions is always difficult. Institutions, that's their job, right? Their fiduciary duty to their LPs is, which I used to do in my prior life, right?
Yeah.
Investing capital in other operators. But some of these institutions, they're just so overindulging, picking the color of the balls and interviewing the managers. It's just, sometimes you feel like, well, if I'm your partner, let me do what I want to do. That's why you partner, do a joint venture with me. But, look, end of the day, everybody has their way of doing things. We all try to learn from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Working with institutions have given us a lot of discipline in how we manage and operate certain things, financial reporting. Because, look, if we want to go public one day, and we can today, but I don't want to, like raising this $500 million fund, I mean, it takes a lot of discipline in terms of your financial reporting and how you set procedures and your processes, the accounting side and asset management. So it has taught us a lot of things, which, to be frank, when we're dealing with high net worth guys, they're not too particular about it other than the check that they're expecting every quarter. So just make sure you give them a check. They're happy. The institution makes you more disciplined. So it has pros and cons to both sides.
Sure. I hear that. I think you started touching on something that I want to end off with, the last 5-10 minutes or so, is, COVID, the pandemic. You guys are under contract for an office space. You're raising a $500 million fund. How do you and your company view the current state of the world, the market going forward? How are you guys looking at all of this currently?
Yeah, I take a very extreme view, and I hope your podcast is okay with me saying that. But, since day one, I just thought shutting down the market and economy wasn't the answer, to be very honest. Because look, I mean, any life lost is one too many. But look at how many people are suffering, not from the virus, but restaurants shutting down, people out of jobs, the mental state of people, which is depressed, staying home, these protests now. I was against shutting down. So my view was, just talking in general, not talking about business, was the shutdown was a wrong move. But at that time, people didn't know what to do. So all the world shut down. Mm-hmm. And I saw that as a great opportunity for me. And I knew that this will not last too long. So we got really aggressive. So we just closed a deal in San Antonio, $40 million. We have $130 million worth of office assets under contract. And I just knew that, your interest rates are zero. Your, lending market is going to open up soon, right? Fed has made the interest rate zero, basically. So there's a lot of liquidity. I mean, the harsh fact is a lot of our tenants, 80% of our tenants are making more money now through unemployment and stimulus checks versus when they were working, right? So it's kind of a bitter truth way to say things. So I feel that it's sad where we are in terms of the market and the world, and hopefully we all get back out there and being able to go back to work. And look, people are saying that it's going to change people's habits. You can't change people's habits. I mean, these are thousands of years of how humans are built. And yeah, if you take a survey now, 6 weeks after the virus, of course people say, I'm going to work from home. I don't need an office. You can't be productive working from home. As a boss, I need my employees in my office to tell them what to do or how to do it. So look, people take extreme views in these times. It's kind of, you can assume that they're taking it because of what's going on. But longer term, I think we'll be fine. I think vaccine will come out, right? And I think there's a lot of uncertainty and fear in people's mind, and media does not a good job of doing that because they keep reporting the numbers, how many cases. But let's also report how many people are recovered. I don't think I heard that factor statistic in a while. Mm-hmm. I mean, 80% of the people are asymptomatic. I mean, I might even have the virus. I didn't even know about it. I came to office every single day. I mean, I worked very hard during this time. During this pandemic, being able to raise a fund of this magnitude and getting these deals tied up, it took a lot of hard work. And now people who are saying who are sitting on sidelines waiting for deals, the special distress deals coming, are waiting for it. I don't think they're going to come. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to come. If you are an owner, I mean, we collected 98, 99, 100% of our rents compared to February, March levels. Why would I sell as an owner? What's the discount for? I'll keep running my assets.
I agree with so many things you said, and I think the biggest thing is that, I tell people now, if a deal comes to market now and a broker tells you, I'm going to get you top dollar, there's such a large population that is just taking those deals and discounting them day one because they think there's a problem. And I've said it too, I get asked a question, you want to sell? I'm like, why would I sell anything now? We're doing better than we ever did.
Yeah.
Get me $40 million and I'll sell, but it's not worth it. So I'm not even considering bringing a deal to market. Now, if someone knocks on my door and wants to give me a stupid number, I'll take it. But, for distressed deals, it hasn't been long enough. It hasn't, the wound is so fresh.
And the distress will happen in certain asset class. So like hotels. So we got 3 hotels under contract, which is a great deal. I mean, these hotels one of them was Staybridge, worth $12 million 6 months ago. Now you can get it for $4.2 million in the foreclosure. I'll be all over it. And look, I'm happy with my basis. A 2015 built nice hotel, $35,000 a unit. I feel like I'm back in 2013 again in apartment complexes, right? So I'm going to get aggressive for those. So there will be distress, but you got to be prudent. You got to think hard long enough. You're not going to get a multifamily asset that was worth 12 for 4 now. You will still have to pay close to 12, right? Or the guy won't sell.
Exactly. It's just you gotta be smart about it, and whether you're aggressively buying or not. To assume after 3 months of a shutdown, there's going to be blood in the water and everything's going to sell at 10 caps when they're selling at 4 caps. It's just not realistic. So I think the uncertainty is what people are just sitting there scratching their head. We offered on more deals over the last 3 months than we have prior to that. Now, maybe our offers were bullshit and a waste of time, but we still were putting the pen to paper and saying, hey, listen, if it's an opportunity, a good deal is a good deal, especially if you go through your due diligence and understand when you're getting yourself involved with. So, to assume that the world is just going to give you a property right now, I think is crazy. I think you just got to be more selective on what you buy, and you got to understand what you're buying. And, I would buy anything as long as all of
the right price. Everything is good at the right price. Right?
Exactly. And that's the one thing that, I agree. I can't say that we have a ton of deals under contract because we don't, because, for whatever reason, we're just not there. But we would be, if the right deal came across this. I mean, this morning we were talking about deals that we offered on, following up on them. So we'll see what happens. But I agree with you. I think that, just what's going on. I mean, if you look at the sheer numbers of it, 200,000 people, 100,000 people are dying. 14 million, 40 million people are unemployed. So every life counts, but at the same time, those people unemployed, it's going to be a very long time and it's going to hurt them. So I agree. A lot of things that happen. You can't fix it. You can only go forward, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And ultimately, look, this COVID, I mean, the virus is not going to go away, right? I mean, we quarantined ourselves for whatever weeks and months or years. You're going to come back out. It's still going to be there. So like I said, a lot of people are asymptomatic, doesn't bother them. But ultimately, people are going to get exposed to it. Whether it's today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, it's up to, it depends on where you are or who you're meeting.
So with all that being said, obviously, we did shut down though, and we are in a position where unemployment is double digits. Yeah. Fed came out and said they expect unemployment by the end of the year to be around 9%. Who knows if they'll be right? Probably they'll be wrong, but if it's higher or lower, who knows? Are you guys adjusting anything for the rest of the year going into next year in operations, acquisitions, anything like that?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about it. Like I said, we're just very trying to live in the present, and whatever comes, let's figure it out if we're going to do it or not. But, one good thing for us as operators is that we'll have wider variety of pool to hire people. Right? If people do want to work. So now that's another debate, right? Democrats want to push another, continue the $600 a week unemployment till like end of next year. I mean, what's the motivation for people going to go back to work? Then your unemployment will stay high.
Yeah. Right?
Even though there's jobs, they're like, I'd rather make more money sitting at home. So it's got to be a good balance between, what stimulus to give out and how aggressive you want to get, because ultimately you do want people to go back to work, right? So look, I mean, I think it's pros and cons, right? Houston, we have another issue about oil prices. So we can't control a lot of these things. I tell all my team here, whatever we can control, just be best at it. Cap rates, unemployment will take care of itself.
I love that. I think at the end of the day, like you said, you can only control what you can control. The other stuff will sort itself out and you'll figure it out. So I think that's an excellent place to wrap up for this episode. Swapnil, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to learn more about you, your company, follow along with anything you guys do, where can they do all of that?
They can connect me with on LinkedIn or Twitter, or you can share with them my email address as well.
Beautiful. We'll be sure to include that all in the show notes for you guys. Anybody listening, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to John and I. If you are already subscribed, please send it to a friend, family member, colleague that you think would get a tremendous amount of value. I think this episode in particular would be a good one. And if you're not already part of our Facebook group, please go check it out. You can go to Facebook and search the Real Estate Investing Experience. I want to connect with you, hear from you guys, and learn all about you. Swapnil, once again, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a ton. This was tremendous. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.